basically say, hey, let's call around to other schools, see what they have, what they're willing to share. We cut and paste, and we spend the time doing it. But people need to understand, we didn't spend money on that, but we certainly spent a lot of sweat equity in it. You know, a lot of other people hired a consultant to write their plans. And yeah, they went ahead and had some people come in and do this, you know, on a 1 or 2 meeting basis. We had our own people do it. You know, so here in Westport, we're trying to do it within what we have and what we can use in terms of our resources. And people just need to be a little patient. You know, when you're talking about a survey of this kind of thing, we could do one tomorrow if we bought it.
I was actually thinking, Dr. Cully, more on the lines of, like this chart on, do you have discretion on discipline and consequences? Because I'm just thinking of a preschool class where a kid, and especially at that level, it happens a lot with biting and hitting. You get a kid that has no intent on hurting this other student, but they have the behavior of hitting. And if you're bound by this, after the 4th, 5th incident, the kid's now getting suspended rather than services they may need.
When you take a look at that, that is one that was developed by the middle school, that chart. That's why it's in the appendix. It's not necessarily part of the plan. You know, each of the schools can develop something similar. And sometimes, you know, at the school level, people want to be more specific. So, you know, we didn't want to take away from the school's responsibility to decide what they want to do. If you look in the plan, however, the range is very wide. So within the plan, again, that's why I wanted to keep the plan more open-ended and less, or more flexible, so to speak, so that at each of the buildings, they can decide how they're going to approach it. I think once you get into the older grade levels, you can be a little bit more specific. But you're right, at the elementary and maybe the MAC, you want a little bit more flexibility because at that point, you're still teaching more than you are providing consequences. Whereas you hope, and again, this is something that doesn't happen overnight, but you hope that as you're teaching, you know, one grade level to the next, to one school to the next, that students have had this kind of training, if you will. And by the time they get to the high school, you hope that that training has followed them all along, and by then you can say, we have done all the teaching that we need to do. When you make a choice to do something that's either against the law or against what we expect of you here in this school, here's the consequence. And they may be a little bit more strict, a little bit more prescribed, and a little bit more severe. Because we do expect that as you go through the schools, you're learning something, not just in terms of art, music, PE, you know, science, math, social studies. We're expecting that, but we're also expecting you to learn how to be part of the social community that's a school. So at this point, yes.
Good. I want to make sure that you were comfortable because you have to implement it, so.
Thank you. Mr. Roy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to take this time to echo what Dr. Colley said a few minutes ago about local resources that help put this together. A lot of them are seated here tonight. I'd like to thank them all for helping out, especially Julie, who drafted the initial, who framed the initial document that we all worked off of, and all the community members, like Pastor Catherine, who came and gave of their time to help put this together. It was a lot of talent, a lot of professionalism that went into putting this together, and I'd like to thank those people who are here tonight.
Thank you, and thank all of you who were involved in this. Well, we do have a meeting scheduled for Wednesday to approve this, but as Mr. Sullivan points out, we
revise that comment.
Sure.
Just to revise that comment, I'm not in a position to make a motion tonight regarding approval, and I'd like to explain why. Although I'm in favor of accepting this plan as presented, today's meeting was posted as a hearing for discussion. we would not be able to undertake a vote today for approval because it is not a posted item. Had we indicated at the beginning of this meeting that we had a revised agenda to consider approval, we could have gone forward. But at this time, I, for one, don't see that it's legal for us to make such a motion. So,
Thank you. Now that, is there any more philosophical issues, comments? Because I have one or two small typographical, technical issues that I may be wrong about, but I just wanted to point out and see if I can be corrected or if they need to be. In the actual plan itself on page 6, item Roman numeral 5, procedures for reporting, it says at the end of the first sentence, receiving oral or written complaints, oral or written, and then further down below in item B, the second line, it says all district employees, faculty, and staff are required and must report in writing any allegations. So I'm just questioning the oral from letter A. How do we want to say it? Oral and written, or just written? Or am I missing something?
Hold on a second. There is a slight difference. You should have the oral and written because sometimes the complaints will come from people other than staff.
Faculty and staff, okay.
For example, you could have small children who can't sit there and write a whole, explanation of what's happening to them. So you want them to be able to do it orally. It could be a parent who, doesn't have access to technology or doesn't want to wait the 2-3 days that the letter would take to get in the mail. If they're at work, they just want to pick up the phone and say, hey, this incident happened. So you do want the oral in there. However, for our staff, we're expecting them to put it in writing.
Thank you for
That's
clearing
part of
that
their
up.
responsibility.
Thanks for clearing that up for me. And then one more on the next page, page 7. Down at the very bottom, the third line from the bottom, appropriate and agreeable to the complainant. It says ND, I believe that should be and.